All right, so what would this arbitration process look like? First of all, it's a tri-party panel, meaning you have a neutral arbitrator and then you have one arbitrator that is appointed by the NALC and one arbitrator that's appointed by the Postal Service. And that's good because the arbitration panel can go in the back and have discussions about all of the testimony and the evidence that's been presented. And it gives us an opportunity to reinforce that, if our things are reasonable and we're promoting something that's for the collective good and something that will work, you can have those discussions in private with the arbitrator as well. So the process works pretty good to achieve a contract that is in the interest of both parties. The language or where the process comes from is the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970. Our brothers and sisters went out on strike. This mural here behind me, here at Branch 11 headquarters in Chicago, is a mural commemorating the strike of 1970. The strike occurred in March of 1970. They went out for about 8 days. They put it all on the line. At the time, pay and benefits were less than what other employees in the private sector were making. And as a result of that strike, the Postal Reorganization Act came in August of 1970. And it said that, this is under Section 101C, as an employer, the Postal Service shall achieve and maintain compensation for its officers and employees comparable to the rates and type of compensation paid in the private sector of the economy of the United States. And then it goes on to say, it shall place particular emphasis upon the achievement of worthwhile and satisfying careers. So that's the basis for determining what the terms of the contract will be. It has to represent a satisfying career. We know right now it doesn't do that because so many people are leaving the job or not even applying for the job. And the pay rates have to be comparable to that in the private sector of the economy of the United States. Now, one of the things that have been presented is that the Postal Service's finances are going to prevent us from getting a fair contract in front of an arbitrator. Well, first let's look at the Postal Service's finances. So the Postal Service has been crying broke, for lack of a better word, for many years now. If you look at this report from the Postal Regulatory Commission going back to fiscal year 2014, you see a lot of losses. You see the post office in the negative, although they were reporting some operating gains, but they were accounting losses basically as a result of the pre-funding mandate that existed prior to 2022. Now, if you look at fiscal year 2022, the situation improved drastically. And as a matter of fact, if we were so concerned about the finances of the Postal Service, fiscal year 2022 began in October 1st of 2022. Fiscal year 2022 begins in October of 2021 and runs through September 30th of 2022. The results of the finances in fiscal year 2022 are not, there's not new results from fiscal year 2023 until, well into the end of 2023. Our contract expired May 20th of 2023. At the time, the most recent fiscal year was fiscal year 2022, which, as you can see on the chart, it doesn't show a very bad economic position at all in the Postal Service. And we had the opportunity to go to arbitration at the expiration of the contract. The first time we could have gone to arbitration would have been July 20th, 60 days after the expiration of the contract per the law. And we chose not to go to arbitration when the financial situation of the Postal Service was really not that bad. And it's gotten worse since then. But the good news about the financial situation now and forever is that the law doesn't say anything about the Postal Service's financial situation. Think about it. When our good brothers and sisters went out on strike in 1970, they didn't go out on strike and say, hey, we think that the U.S. government has more money. They didn't say that. They said, here's what we deserve. We deserve this type of a wage and benefits, and they changed the law to reflect that because they didn't want us to go out on strike anymore. Arbitration is something they gave to us. Binding arbitration is a reward to us so that we don't go out on strike. And so the law is rewritten in the way that is rewritten that just says comparable pay to the private sector, career job, a stable career job. And the Postal Service, every time they go to arbitration, has been, trying to cry broke. So if you look at the Goldberg Award, and this was APWU, but it's the same law, it's the same postal employees, it's the same, you're comparing apples to apples here. Goldberg was the neutral arbitrator. The Postal Service had been crying broke during the arbitration hearings, and Goldberg issued his award May the 10th of 2020, and he says on page 20, as for the evidence and argument put forth by the parties with respect to the Postal Service's financial condition and the effect that should have on the award, I shall be brief. The issue was discussed and resolved in this panel's 2016 award, APW award, and need not be discussed again. For the reasons stated in the 2016 award, I do not view the Postal Service's financial condition as calling for a modification or rejection of the statutory comparability standard. Layman's terms, he's going to use the law and the comparability standard in the law to determine wages and benefits for a postal employee. He's not going to look at what the Postal Service's finances are. So that's good news for us. All right, so if you're going to compare our wages and benefits to those in the private sector, the most reasonable comparison would be to UPS drivers. The UPS drivers have a section of the contract under the Teamsters UPS contract because the Teamsters represent other people besides UPS drivers, whereas we, the National Association of Letter Carriers, we only represent letter carriers. But if you compare their contract for UPS drivers versus our contract for letter carriers, you will see that one, they've done pretty good recently, and they've got some significant pay raises for their drivers. So the top rate, well, the average top rate, because they have a nationwide contract. The comparison is they have a nationwide contract, they wear uniforms, they're in the delivery business, they drive a truck, we drive a truck. The comparisons are pretty similar as far as the job description and things like that. They will average top pay will be $49 at the expiration of their contract, which will be in 2027. You look up on the screen, you'll see that even now in 2024, their average top pay is $45 an hour, and it only takes 4 years for them to achieve the top pay. So that's significantly higher than what our pay is. Our pay starts at, for career letter carriers, our pay under the tentative agreement would start around $26 an hour, and it would end around like $42 an hour. Their pay is significantly higher than our pay. But of course, you're going to compare pay and benefits, and we do have some benefits that are significantly better than UPS drivers. Now, their health insurance is free. The company pays 100% of their health insurance. So that's another knock against our contract, or makes our contract less than theirs. But there's some other benefits, like the amount of leave that we get. We get a significant amount of leave. We get sick leave, annual leave, holidays, all paid. Retirement, our retirement system is very good with the defined pension, with the amount that the Postal Service has to put in to that defined pension under FERS, with the amount they have to match under the TSP. So everybody gets this personal statement of benefits every year. And I pulled up, somebody's personal statement of benefits. I couldn't use my own because I get mostly a zero check from the Postal Service every year. But so they wouldn't be that high. But if you take someone who's at top pay, you add up all of their benefits, including their pay and everything, it comes out to about $142,000 per year. That's at the top. UPS puts on their website that their average pay and benefits for their drivers is $145,000. So whether you're comparing straight pay or you're comparing pay and benefits, however you compare it, UPS drivers are making more than a city letter carrier. So that comparison would go in our favor, okay? Now the second comparison would be to a USPS clerk. And the USPS clerk pay scale is under level 6 in the APW contract. Now, I think, and I know, based on the 1999 Fleischie Award, we went to arbitration, we said, letter carrier, we used to bargain jointly with the APW and the clerks, and we were on the same pay scale as them. And in 1999, we had separated, we're doing our own bargaining, and we went to arbitration, and we told the arbitrator that, hey, letter carrier work is harder than clerk work, and it's even more so now than it was in 1999. But at that time, the arbitrator agreed with us and moved us up a level. So if you look at the APW pay chart, there's different levels. There's 3 through 11. And I don't know what all the levels are. I know the clerk is level 6, but the other levels are, let's say the custodian would be on the lower level, maybe level 4 or something. And then you have mechanics, you have truck drivers and things like that that would be on the higher level. But of course, if we were still on that pay chart, we would not be at level 6. We would have to be at level 7 or level 8, which you can see is higher than what the clerks make now. The starting pay for clerks is higher than our starting pay, even after you go through the tentative agreement, meaning that even after you put in the cost of living raises, even after you put in the 1.3%, even after you put in the upgrade to the starting pay, which will take place, significant upgrade to the starting pay, which will take place within 180 days of ratification, even after you do all of that, the starting pay for the APW clerk is still higher than that of a letter carrier. Matter of fact, you could work the first 6 years of your career, as a clerk and make more money than a letter carrier. Now, after that, it starts to shift more because we end up at a higher rate of pay than the clerk does. And after a while, it catches up. And then throughout a career, you would see that we make about $200,000 more approximately. And this is just estimating because you don't know what the wage progression would be. But based on the terms of the tentative agreement and based on, let's say the clerks get because their contract just expired, let's say they get another 1.3% plus COLAs, similar to what we got, then you would look at their pay rate and factor it out for 30 years. And over a 30-year career, we end up making more money than they do over a career. But the first 6 years, they actually make more than us, and it's really not a significantly higher amount of pay that it should be. So when we look at a comparability standard, if we were to go to arbitration, I think it's reasonable to assume that our pay and benefits would end up being somewhere in between what clerks get and what UPS drivers get. And right now, under the terms of the tentative agreement, our pay in a lot of ways is even less than what clerks make, but let's call it comparable to what the clerks are already getting. If we go to arbitration, we have a chance to get more than that and bring us closer to what UPS drivers are making, because the comparability standard is comparing to the private sector of the economy of the United States. So I think we have a good shot there. A couple other things we're looking at if we go to arbitration. One is obviously improvements or the elimination of the CCA classification. That's something that we can't do no worse. I mean, the CCA pay is worse now than it's ever been, and there's no improvement in the CCA classification whatsoever. If we go to arbitration, we have a chance to make some improvements there. And then the third thing I would say is, if you look at the pay chart, one of the things that happened in the tentative agreement is there's a consolidation of the pay charts. Well, the consolidation was to the benefit of the Postal Service, because in the Table 1 versus Table 2, the Postal Service benefits greatly from Table 2. We benefit from Table 1. Table 1 has a much higher starting pay. Table 1 has raises that are front-loaded. Table 1 has a full COLA at every step of the process, and both of them end up at the same point. But you're going to make a whole lot more money if you're in Table 1 versus Table 2. So with the tentative agreement, putting everyone in Table 2 and having the diet COLAs, the prorated COLAs throughout the pay chart, we couldn't really do no worse than that. We would make the argument to the arbitrator that everyone should be in Table 1 with the higher starting pay and the other benefits of Table 1. And maybe we end up with a whole new pay chart that's in between Table 1 and Table 2. But if you consolidate the pay charts, you can't do no worse than everyone going into Table 2, which is what we have now. So to me, the pay and benefits, because they don't keep up with inflation and because they're similar to what clerks get, we couldn't do no worse with that. With the CCA classification, our goal of going to an all-career model, we couldn't do any worse than what we ended up with in the tentative agreement. And the pay chart, ending up with everyone in Table 2 versus Table 1, we couldn't do no worse than that either if we go to arbitration. So the bottom line is you never know what the result is going to be if you go to arbitration, but we know if we accept the terms of this tentative agreement, this subpar, lousy pay and benefits and shitty working conditions, if we accept that now, the next time we go to bargain for a contract, the Postal Service is going to throw that in our face or throw that in front of a neutral arbitrator and say, hey, this was good enough for the letter carriers then. Even after they served us after the pandemic and even after risking their lives out there in the street and dealing with all the elements and everything and the dangers of the job, the letter carriers accepted a contract that was this level of pay and benefits. And if we accept it now, it's going to be hard for us to ever improve upon that in the future. If we go to arbitration, I think we have a good chance of making improvements. But even if we lose that arbitration and we keep the same thing that we got, at least we can say that we put up a fight and we stood for something. It's about time that as a union, we get together and we stand for what we deserve, which is a good contract with good pay and benefits and working conditions, and one that respects us as letter carriers. We're trying to bring some dignity back to this job. One of the ways we can do that is by getting together with your brothers and sisters and voting this contract down and forcing us to go to arbitration. All right, brothers and sisters, let's do this. Share these videos with all of your coworkers. Let's get everyone in the NALC prepared to vote no on this tentative agreement and go to arbitration. We can do better than what's in this tentative agreement. We have a pledge card, a vote no pledge card, which you guys can share with everybody that you work with, everybody in your branch, everybody that you know around the country. Let's get as many letter carriers as possible to pledge to vote no on this tentative agreement and take our case to arbitration. Let's fight for the contract that we deserve.